I just fucking beat Lucid Nightmares! I really have no words. I fluked Lucid Nightmares from 73%. This is the best fluke I've ever done. I don't know how I did that. So my grand total of attempts is 20,834, which is actually way less than I was expecting to take on this level. Lucid Nightmares is hard as hell, and the fact that I managed to knock this out in about the same attempts as freaking Bloodlust, that's insane, especially for a level that made me struggle as much as this one did. I absolutely cannot believe that I pulled this off. Fluking this from 73 is something I didn't even consider possible, but I did. I got so lucky with this. Oh my gosh, I'm so proud of myself. Lucid Nightmares by Cairo. Once again, just like with Crimson Planet and Sonic Wave, this is a level that I never saw myself beating. Unlike levels like Bloodlust, where I always planned to beat them someday, Lucid Nightmares is a level that I just straight up never was going to beat. And this was mainly due to the awful reputation that this level has. As I'm sure a lot of you know, back in the day, Technical was, I believe, the second victor of this level, and whenever he beat this level, he hated it. It was one of his least favorite levels of all time, and the stuff that he said about the level, like the bad transitions and the waves being the hardest parts of the level, which are very fair complaints, they kind of tainted this level's image, and as a result of that, I never really wanted to try it. I did have a lot of interest with the level, as I have with pretty much all of Cairo's levels, because Cairo is very talented with making very cool levels atmospherically and making also very intense levels. That's a talent that he holds. Despite that though, I really didn't want to touch it because I was so scared of it. I don't blame Technical. His opinion is not the only bad opinion about this level, but his is the one that stuck with me the most, so that was probably the biggest reason why I never ended up going for this level. After I wrapped up Concaved Memories a little over a month ago, Cairo himself actually saw my review of the level and reached out to me in DMs. He began speaking with me about my experiences with his levels, and he personally recommended Metal Requiem, his solo extreme demon, for me to give a shot. And I did end up giving that level a shot. However, about a week and a half before the fall semester ended, I got an intrusive thought to do Lucid Nightmares as the second hardest. As a lot of you know, my next planned hardest is going to be Waterfall, and because of that, I want to start to get a lot better at the game because Waterfall is so much harder than I expected it to be, and I thought that Lucid Nightmares would be a really good way to get better at the game. And so yeah, instead of Metal Requiem, I ended up doing Lucid Nightmares. And somehow, despite everything that I expected this level to be, this is my new favorite Cairo level by quite a long shot. So, for gameplay, I'm going to divide this level up into 6 sections. The pre-drop, which is 0 to 13%, the first part of the drop, which is 13 to 31%, the second part of the drop, which is 31 to 48%. That's all the first half of the level. Then for the second half of the level, we have the third drop, which is 50 to 66%, the fourth drop, which is 67 to 84%, and the post drop, which is 84 to 100%. And I'm going to go front to back, starting with the pre-drop. The pre-drop of Lucid Nightmares is by far the hardest part of the level gameplay wise. The gameplay here is absolutely brutal. It's filled with ridiculous timings, insanely tight ship gaps. It was probably the most intimidating part of the level for me going into it. I was super scared of this section whenever I first started playing it. However, for the most part, it got really consistent, which I really wasn't expecting. I found the pre-drop to be pretty fun overall. Despite the sheer difficulty of the pre-drop, a lot of it was really fun to play, specifically the first 5%. I found it really satisfying. I never really found it boring, and it was basically everything a pre-drop should be in my opinion. My true complaint with this part is the red orb and the UFO at 7%. That timing is horrendous. It's inconsistent, it's mainly setup based, and the timing itself is insanely tight. And it's definitely the hardest click in the entire level. That click is insane. I have some statistics written down right here. So I had 5,337 attempts from 0 on this level, which is about a quarter of my overall attempts. Of those attempts from 0, 70% of them ended in the pre-drop. That means that over 3,000 of my attempts were just straight deaths to the pre-drop. I'm gonna put some statistics of the pre-drop up on screen now about where I died to the hardest percentages of the pre-drop, but with the 7% UFO specifically, I had a pass rate of 51% with that clip, which doesn't sound terrible, but that was actually my lowest pass rate out of any input in the entire level. That UFO was the worst choke point for me in the entire level. Overall though, I really don't hate the pre-drop. I actually found it pretty fun and fair for the most part. I just really didn't like that UFO click. Moving on to the drop now. The first part of the drop was definitely my favorite part of this level. It felt the most intense out of any other part in the level. It was the most consistent, it was the fastest, and damn, it was just insanely fun. I love this section, dude. The waves in this section make you feel like an absolute badass. The dual wave at 18% and the waves at 23 and 24% are the best examples of this. They're insanely hard, absolutely, but they're ultra consistent and really fair. So as a result of that, I was able to get crazy consistent with them despite their just absurd difficulty. And as a result of these waves getting really consistent, despite this entire section being one of the hardest parts of the level, I was able to do it almost every attempt towards the end of my time with this level. Like, it got so consistent. I really just loved the gameplay of this entire section as well. Like, it was never annoying and I loved it to death. Sure, I got frustrated dying to the waves because they were just really hard, but it wasn't because they're bad, it's because they're just that difficult. Any issues that I had with this part initially whenever I first started this level either got ironed out or I figured out a workaround to them, so as a result of that, I have no issues with this part. This part was basically flawless for me. I really liked this section. Now moving on to the second part of the drop. This was probably the hardest part of the level for me, not including the pre-drop, specifically the duel and the 39% wave. I'm not sure why the non-wave parts of the duel gave me such a hassle. I think it's because the duel as a whole is pretty setup based, so I was never able to get fully comfortable with it from 0%. The fact that I struggled with the non-wave parts of the duel didn't really help with the fact that I found the duel wave and the 39% wave following it to be the hardest parts of the drop by far. The three inputs of the dual wave, those being a click, a release, and a click, are all insanely tight gaps. Since there were little invisible spikes attached to the slopes of the wave gaps, those gaps are a lot more difficult than they look, especially because they're on 4x speed. However, the dual wave really wasn't bad or anything, it was just really damn hard, and actually whenever I was able to do it consistently, that was really damn satisfying. I didn't dislike it at all. Following this dual wave is the 39% wave, and this wave was probably the hardest part of the level for me overall. The 39% wave is just an absolutely insane wave. It was the biggest choke point for me from 0% besides the UFO click in the pre-drop. My pass rate with this part was 61%. It was pretty low. It wasn't horrible or anything, but whenever I started getting there consistently from 0, it felt like I died there all the time, which isn't a massive complaint because it's a very fair part to die to, but you know, it was pretty damn hard. That being said, this might be my favorite wave in any level ever. The way that this wave flows and the click pattern that this wave is based off of is so incredibly satisfying. I absolutely adored the wave. And fun fact, it was the first part of the level that I learned. Like I said, it's hard as hell, so I did get pretty frustrated with it at times, but that doesn't mean the wave itself is bad. It's really just that difficult. Now, the section from 40 to 48% is like a little break in between the hard parts of Lucid Nightmares. I really like that because it kind of gave me a chance to breathe in between the really difficult sections of this level. That being said, I felt like I died to this section way more than I should have. I choked a lot in this section. It's not a bad part or anything, I was just constantly choking from 0. I think I'm gonna blame that on the freaking out about passing the 39 wave. Like, every time I got past the 39 wave, I'd freak out a little bit on the inside because I passed one of the hardest parts of the level, and as a result, I died to some pretty easy stuff. It wasn't super frustrating, but you know, I really wanted to get to the second half of the level, so dying there was never fun, but I didn't hate the part. It was pretty satisfying on its own, actually. Other than that, I really don't have much else to say about 40 to 48. Overall, the second part of the drop was probably the section of the drop that I struggled with the most. That being said, it wasn't unfun or anything. I still really enjoyed this part. The first half of Lucid Nightmares is definitely the harder half of this level. However, it's also the most consistent half, and in my opinion, it's the most fun half. I'm a massive fan of this section. It was never boring to play through, and while it did get frustrated at times, that's not because it was bad, it was because it was difficult. Moving on to the second half of this level, this is where I start to have a lot more issues with this level, most of which I'm going to go into in a second. Next up, I'm going to dive into the third part of the drop, which is 50 to 66%. This was definitely my least favorite part of the level to play, and it was definitely the most inconsistent part of the level for me overall as well. This section never felt truly natural to play, and despite some of it being pretty satisfying due to things like moving objects, it was also just really damn awkward to play. I guess my main complaints with this section start with the 54 to 57% 66% section. This little part, for lack of a better term, was terrible. It starts off with a bad transition into a robot section with 2 incredibly precise jumps, followed by an incredibly setup based blue orb, which is then followed by a very difficult spider. This entire section was such a killer whenever trying to get runs on this level. I expected to die to this part 10, maybe 20 times from zero on its own. Despite that, I only died between 54 and 57% once. This is probably a really good time to mention that I did manage to fluke Lucid Nightmares from 73%, which is, in my opinion, the most insane fluke I've ever done in this game. I had 9 deaths to the third part of the drop, 50 to 66%, and 1 death to the fourth part of the drop, that being 73%. I'll get into my fluke a little more later, but basically I got insanely lucky with this level, and as a result, I had basically no deaths to sections where I probably should have had at least 10 to 15 deaths. Like, I got so lucky with this level. The 59 to 66% section is also pretty damn hard. It starts off with one of the hardest waves in the level. Despite how easy it looks, it's really damn tight, and that added together with the fact that the transition into it is pretty rough, that wave was always pretty scary to me. And somehow, thanks to my fluke, I never died to it. Never died to that wave once. That makes me feel kind of guilty, but you know, I'll take it. I'm not gonna complain. The rest of the section is all pretty difficult on its own, but the main thing I'm gonna go into is the transition at 64%. This transition, in my opinion, is the single worst transition in the entire level. I hated this transition. Maybe I didn't do the transition correctly in my time playing this level, but I would constantly lose runs to this transition. And it never really got better either. Unlike the rest of this level, this transition was always a massive roadblock to me. And yet, thanks to my fluke, I only died to it once. I had a singular death to the 64% transition. I feel like my fluke and the lack of deaths that I had to this transition probably saved my experience with this level. If I got really unlucky with this, I could have seen this experience going really, really bad. Overall, 50 to 66% feels really inconsistent as compared to the rest of the level, and it was definitely the hardest section of the second half of the level overall. Lucky for me though, I barely had to play it from zero to beat Lucid Nightmares, so I probably don't have much room to complain about it anyways. Moving on to the fourth and final part of the drop, which is 67 to 84%. Funnily enough, this section actually started off as one of the hardest and most inconsistent parts of the entire level for me. With time and practice though, this section became one of the easiest and one of the most consistent parts of the level overall. I was able to do it like 90% of the time towards the end. The main highlight of this section that I'm going to go over is 71 to 75%. This section was such a massive killer for me in the first week and a half that I was playing this level. I could never get runs to 100 from anything other than 66%, and I'd basically constantly die to this section because it's really damn hard. The ship at 72% is incredibly difficult, and the transition into the wave that follows it is pretty rough. The wave itself is also pretty difficult. Then after you get out of that wave, you have to hit a pink orb and go through what is essentially a ship gap pulled straight out of Slaughterhouse. That section is brutal. However, as I just said, it ended up getting crazy consistent. And it was even pretty satisfying to pull off. I actually liked the part towards the end, which I never thought I was ever going to say because I hated it at first. After the 75% ship gap, there really isn't anything too notable with this section to mention. Really, the only thing that people struggle with after the 75% ship gap is the 83% UFO. However, I had a strategy with the dash orb into that UFO that basically caused me to have like a 95% pass rate with it. So it never gave me any issues. Overall, I'm pretty surprised to say that I actually ended up enjoying this part a fair bit, and I even managed to fluke the majority of it, which is still absolutely insane to me. I really never expected to fluke this section, especially not the 75% ship gap. That's actually insane to me. Moving on to the last part of this level now, the post-drop. The ending of Lucid Nightmares is infamous for being insanely chokeable, which is completely reasonable because look at that damn wave, dude. 89 to 92% is absolutely brutal. And thinking about doing this part with nerves just scared me. I never thought that fluking this section would be possible. Despite how scary the part seems though, it's crazy consistent. It's really easy to make a click pattern for the entirety of the wave. So towards the end of my time playing this level, I was able to do the part like 4 to 5 times times in a row, basically every single day. Like, it's really, really consistent, despite how difficult it is. As a result of that, once I got there from 0, even though my heart rate was at like 180 BPM, I managed to lock in and not throw my fluke. The ship at the very end of the level isn't really anything to mention. It's really not that hard. It's a little awkward, but with a little practice, you can basically do it every single attempt. Overall, the ending was definitely scary, but honestly, it was kind of overhyped. I really didn't find it that bad. Once again, I really have no idea how I was able to fluke this level. I truly do believe that this beats out my flukes on both Akira and Fog. Despite me saying that the ending of this level is definitely flukable, in no universe did I ever expect to actually fluke it. Just because a level has the potential to be fluked, it doesn't mean that fluking it is easy, and the thought process that I had going into the final ship was just like, how am I even here right now? I truly can't explain how I was able to pull that off last night. In conclusion, Lucid Nightmares is a level that I never expected to beat. It's a level that I've always been terrified of, and it's a level that I always expected to hate if I ever tried to beat it. Despite that though, this level's a blast. Progress felt very linear with this level. Every time I opened up the level, I improved at the level in some way. Either I got a new best run or I was a lot more consistent with the level. And because of that, I was always super excited to open up the level every day and play it. Levels that make you feel like you get better every day do not come around very often, so the fact that I found Lucid Nightmares to be like that was such a blessing. It was so enjoyable. I'm not saying that the level's perfect or anything. It definitely has its issues, but if you're able to recognize where these issues lie and how to practice them and get good at them, the level's pretty fun. Like, it's really fun. I really like Lucid Nightmares. As for difficulty, this is easily my second hardest achievement. This trumps Bloodlust. For a while, I was even tempted to say that this level was harder than Crimson Planet, but towards the end of my time with this level, I ended up getting better with it, and I don't think that that's true anymore. However, Crimson Planet and Lucid Nightmares are very, very close. Lucid Nightmares is much closer in difficulty to Crimson Planet than it is to Bloodlust. So yeah, new second artists. My top 3 is Crimson Planet, Lucid Nightmares, and Bloodlust. That actually goes so hard. That's an awesome top 3. Overall, honestly, if you're interested in Lucid Nightmares, I'd say give it a shot. You just have to be willing to accept the fact that the level itself is flawed and it does have issues. If you enjoyed levels like Crimson Planet, I'd say give this level a shot. You're probably gonna like it because I found this level pretty similar in nature to the way Crimson Planet plays. On the other hand though, if you didn't like Crimson Planet, I don't think this would be the level for you. But yeah, that's all I got for Lucid Nightmares. The grind towards Waterfall continues. I'm planning on doing another level around Bloodlust difficulty in the near future, so stay tuned for that. But yeah, that's all I got.